Hey everyone, today I am being inspired by a Scraplift. I'll explain what that is in a moment, but first of all I'm going to cut out the circles for this layout. Now the circles I'm cutting are 1.5 inches, and I did try to use my circle cutter straight off, but the pieces of paper I'm using aren't big enough for it to be stable, so I've resorted to drawing the circles and then cutting them out by hand. So whilst I'm cutting out all these circles, scraplifting. Scraplifting is taking inspiration from somebody else's layout. In this case, I've taken some inspiration from Yana Eubank, and I'm going to not quite recreate her layout, but I'm going to use the feature of these folded circles to create my layout. So scraplifting isn't necessarily directly copying, it's taking inspiration from a piece and creating your own version, so to speak. Now, it's really important that you give credit where it's due. Even if you're not sharing it on social media, I still feel it's a really good idea to pop information on the back of your layout so that you know where it's come from. So if you ever do want to share it, you've already got the information, you don't have to go trawling through for things. So yes, scraplifting is kind of like copying, but not. It's taking inspiration. And you know, every piece of artwork, every piece of creativity comes from some form of inspiration. So if you have taken direct inspiration from someone and you know what it is, give them credit. If you haven't, that's fine. Now, once I've got all these circles cut out, I'm just going to make sure I've removed all the pencil lines. Then I'm going to get on and fold them. I got really lucky. My ruler is the perfect width for me to do this scoring. So I just need to score down each side of the ruler. So what I did, I positioned the circle on my cutting mat, popped the ruler in pretty much the centre and scored each side. I used the back of a scalpel to do it. I didn't cut, and then I've just folded each of those flaps in to create a kind of petal shape. That's it. It takes a little while to do the prep for this kind of layout, and this is the most time consuming bit of the entire layout. But it was well worth it. I had so much fun doing it. When I first saw Yana's layout, I was like, meh. But that's because I'm not a big fan of the papers she's chosen. That's okay. But I can take something from it. So I played around with this a lot in my mind as to what I wanted from it, where I wanted to go. I knew I wanted to use a certain background. I wanted to use up scraps of paper, which is what I've done. And because these circles can be any size, you can use smaller circles, you can make larger circles. I think it'd be really interesting to do it with smaller and larger circles as well, if it comes to it. Now, the other thing I realised whilst doing it is it's really difficult to be precise. So some of mine are slightly wonky, where the corners are slightly boxed. It was just so tricky. So don't worry about precision with it. The other thing I decided to do was to punch out some inch circles from this gold vellum, because that's roughly the same size as each of these squares. Once I'd folded in the corners, they'd become approximately an inch square. Really handy. And I pulled out this navy blue background because I love this colour so much, and it works really well with some of the papers. And all I'm going to do is play around with those circles and squares to see what I could create with it. So just adding the photo that I've chosen, moving things around. I do wind up cutting the photo down slightly because it's just a little bit too big for me to make it work. So I took about 1/2 inch off either side, and then I decided, well, what if rather than putting the photo on top, I put the photo behind and I build from that. So that's what I decided to do, is build from the photo up. And actually, I really love the results. So I had this kind of grid pattern, get them all stuck down. I've used wet glue to stick down the vellum, just because you do see things through vellum. So my glue dots, my glue runner, you really see it. Whereas with the wet glue, yes, you do see it, but it's not as obvious because it's a blob of glue in the middle, rather than lots of little dots in it that show through. So just personal preference for me, that's why I stuck down these particular bits of vellum. And as you can see, I've gone over my photo with them so that it overlaps and frames the photo. Now I did feel this looked a bit bland. I wanted something in the centre of these squares. So I pulled out from my scraps again a piece of paper. It's a light pink patterned paper, and I used it to punch hearts. So the punch is from Stampin' Up, and I just punched out these hearts, as many as I could. I just went around the entire 6x6 square, and now I can start to play around with them. I wanted to add some of these in the centres of the squares and the circles, which came to look really effective, but this is me. I don't like rigidity is the word I want. I also decided that actually let's stick some outside those squares. Let's tuck them in behind the squares and circles, go a bit off piste, leave a couple of the squares like free where there's nothing on top of them. And I've used a wet glue to stick these down. It's a little bit easier than using my glue runner because they are quite small. So just getting them in there, positioning them around, seeing what looks good, seeing what doesn't, and then just sticking them down. Once I'd put them down with the glue, that was it, they were staying. So don't worry about it. And as you can see, just tucking them in all over the place. So it becomes a bit of a scattering. So I've got a bit of formality with this grid and the ones that I put inside the grid. And then I've got this sort of off-piste, if you like, flow of hearts running through. And it really makes it cohesive for me. Really chuffed with it. So once I've done that, I don't want to add much more in the way of embellishment. I really want to go on to my title. Now, titles for me, when there's a cat involved, are always what's called a kittyism, or, oh yeah, and I also added a little square of a square sticker just inside there, but back to the titles. So titles for me are always the form of a kittyism, so it's personifying the cat, you know, like a meme. Ken has cheeseburger, that kind of thing. I added a date down the bottom. I don't often date my layouts, but this one I wanted to because I was cat sitting at the time. I've pulled out these Lily Bee Designs really diddy letters. I mean, these are old, so I figured I needed to use them. So the title is You Does Jigsaw, My Halps. So at the top, I'm doing the You Does Jigsaw. I'm going to use it as a small font for it. And get the tweezers out because my fingers are not small enough, my nails are not long enough to do that grippy bit, so the tweezers can do it for me. I wanted to put the question at the top and the my helps down the bottom. It didn't quite work out like that, as you'll see. I do a lot of playing around with this title for the second part, for my helps. I tried it in different places, it just didn't work. It was partly the font just faded into the background, which I don't like if I had it on the photo, and if I had it right down the bottom it just looked like I had letters floating in midair. So I did decide to change the font in the end. I went for a very, very large font and stuck it on pop dots for my helps, and that just allowed me to have a title that looks like it's part of the layout rather than just floating under the layout randomly. It's one of these design decisions that you take as you go. And like I say, I found this wasn't working for me. Could have stuck with it. I didn't. I chose to change it, and it was the best decision I could have made. So here's the original layout, and here's my take on it. I really hope you enjoyed watching this video today. I hope it inspires you to go and do some scrap lifting or even to cut out some circles. I'd love to see what you do. If you enjoyed this video, please share it with your friends, and I really hope you have an excellent day today. Thanks for watching and thanks for being with me. Take care. Bye.